So the battle has begun. The 401k versus the IRA. You right now have money inside your retirement account and you're trying to figure out what's the most optimal location for you to have your money. Should you leave it inside your retirement account through your job, like a 401k or a 403b or a TSP, or should you move it over to an IRA? It's one of the biggest questions that we get here at our office every single week. And so we're going to be diving deep on why it does make sense to move it into the IRA. And I'm going to go over a couple reasons why you might want to leave it inside your existing plan at your job. My name is Sebastian Guerra, president and partner here at Guerra Wealth Advisors, where we help families get to the point where work becomes an option and not an obligation. If you're an individual that is planning on retiring over the next couple years and you really care a lot about your finance, your retirement, your investments, your estate plan, who's going to get all your money when you're not here, make sure you subscribe as we put out videos on a weekly basis where we talk about everything that has to do on the subject of money and specifically on the subject of retirement. Let's jump right in. So we met with John and Lisa Thompson a couple months ago. They're 62 years old and they had $500,000 inside their 401k. And they're planning on retiring over the next couple years and they're trying to figure out if it makes sense to just leave the money inside the 401k or should they do something called a rollover or a transfer out from the 401k and move it into the IRA. Now, if you don't know how to do that, there's just a few little steps that you want to make sure that you do if you do want to do that. The first thing is you want to go and find a financial custodian. There's a lot of big institutions out there like Fidelity, Vanguard, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, all these institutions that can gladly open up a traditional IRA for you. It's completely free of charge. Now, the next thing you might want to consider is doing something called a rollover, where you're going to reach out to your existing company where your 401k is at, and you're going to let them know that you would like to roll your account out into a traditional IRA. Normally, when you do a rollover, there's no taxes that need to be paid, there's no fees that need to be paid, and there's no penalties that need to be paid for most retirement accounts at your job. But before we get into doing that, first I think we need to understand, well, what's the benefit of actually moving your money from the 401k to the IRA? And there's normally 7 reasons why you might want to do this. So the first reason is something called investment flexibility. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people don't really know that if you have a 401k at your job, they normally give you this menu, right? And it's a menu of different mutual funds that you can select from. And it's normally anywhere between 10, 15, or 20 different funds, and you have to select from that list. It's kind of like if right now you decided to go and buy all of your groceries at CVS or at Walgreens or your local convenience store. Well, most of us wouldn't go and buy all of our groceries at these locations because the options that these convenience stores give us is very, very little versus probably a big grocery store chain that has thousands and thousands of items. It's the exact same thing as it pertains to your retirement account. You see, your 401k has a list of about 10, 15, 20 different funds. Whereas an IRA, you have the entire stock market to choose from. So you can invest into pretty much any stock you want, any bond you want, any mutual fund, any ETF. If you want to get into real estate, the investment options are a lot higher inside an IRA versus a 401k. You're limited to only selecting from the list of the funds that they give you. And this is the reason why a lot of the people that we meet with that have IRAs, they normally perform at a higher rate and the return is normally higher because they have better funds to select to get better performance out of their accounts. The second reason is something called fees. Now, some people might say, well, do IRAs have higher fees if you have the money in there? Well, a lot of people don't really know that if you have your money at a 401k company, like a Vanguard or a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity, you see, all of these institutions, they normally have something called management fees that they charge all of the participants inside those 401ks. And those management fees can be anywhere from 0.1% to as high as 1 or 1.5%. I've even seen as high as 2% a year. Now, you might be thinking, well, how does that really apply to me? Well, if you think about the fact that you might have a 401k that let's just say it's earning you 8% a year, but you're paying 1% or 2% a year in management fee, then you're really not making 8%. You can be making only as low as 6%. And you might think, well, 2% is not a big deal, but when you're compounding this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years all throughout retirement, this can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars of missed out growth just simply because you were paying higher fees. Whereas an IRA, you can invest into stocks, which most of these institutions, you don't even have to pay any fees to buy and invest into stocks. Now, you might want to pay a management fee to an advisor if they're helping you plan your entire financial plan, but you don't necessarily have to pay ongoing expense ratios like you normally have inside mutual funds inside your 401k. So normally what we've seen is by moving your money from a 401k into an IRA, you can normally significantly change the amount of fees that you're paying by shifting it over into a traditional IRA. So the third reason is something called control. Now, this doesn't apply to all 401ks, but many people that have a 401k or a 403b through their job, sometimes their companies that they work at, they kind of put these restrictions on you, the employee, on how you can withdraw money from those accounts. And sometimes they might only allow you to withdraw a certain amount per year, or they might put some restrictions that if you take too much money out, then they're not going to match you. So there's all these rules that sometimes they put in. Whereas in an IRA, it's in your control. So you can have your money inside your IRA, say at Charles Schwab or Fidelity or any of these big institutions. And if you want to withdraw money out, there are no questions asked as far as you wanted to take that money out. Whereas a 401k, you normally have to go fill out a form, you have to call the company. Sometimes it can be days or weeks before you ever get the money. Whereas an IRA, you can literally get the money from your IRA straight into your bank account within 24 to 48 hours. So the fourth reason is something called Roth conversions. You see, if you have money inside a 401k through your job and you want to move that money from a 401k into, for example, a Roth IRA, most companies don't even let you move your money from the 401k into a Roth 401k because most companies don't even offer something called a Roth 401k. So you normally want to first is roll your money out from your 401k into a traditional IRA, and then every single time you want to convert your traditional IRA to a Roth, it is allowed if you have already moved it into a traditional IRA. So the benefit behind this is that now if you have your money inside a Roth IRA, all of the growth for the rest of your life, you're never going to have to pay any taxes on any of the growth, especially after you're not here. Now your family can inherit that money and they also don't have to pay tax. Now the fifth area is something called tax efficient withdrawals. Now you might be asking, well, what do you mean by this? Well, if you now have moved the money over to a Roth IRA because you first moved it to a traditional IRA before that, now you can start withdrawing money out of that Roth IRA during retirement, and none of the money inside that account is going to be taxed during retirement. So that's why the goal is that you eventually get as much as you possibly can over into Roth IRAs, but the only way to do that is by getting it first into a traditional IRA. The sixth reason is lowering something called RMDs, which stands for required minimum distributions. You see, if you don't know what that is, normally at age 73 years old, the government has this rule that says when you turn 73 years old, if you have money inside a 401k, you have to now start withdrawing money out of those accounts, and you now need to start paying taxes on every dollar that you take out. It's a federal law that forces people to start emptying out their retirement accounts because the government wants to start taxing you on every dollar that you pull out. So a strategy that you could implement is moving your 401k into an IRA, and by shifting more of it over to Roth IRAs do not have RMDs. They don't have required minimum distributions, so you're not forced to have to take money out of the Roth IRA. But you could only get it into the Roth IRA if you first move it into a traditional IRA. And the last reason is better treatment for whoever receives the money, which is normally going to be your children. You see, when a person passes away with a 401k or with an IRA for that matter, there's normally a rule called the 10-year rule, which means that after you and your spouse have passed away, your children must empty out that retirement account within the next 10 years after the last person has passed away. So imagine you right now pass away, you leave everything to your child, but then now your child has all of the money inside a 401k, where your child has to empty that account within 10 years of your passing. So if you leave the money inside the 401k and it grows for 10 years, and say it's $500,000 today, but 10 years later it's $1 million, now your son or your daughter has to empty the entire thing by the end of the 10th year, which means that it's going to be 100% taxed at their tax bracket on their 10th year. So imagine $1 million coming out as income for them. That's going to shoot them into the highest tax bracket in America, which means it's going to be over 30 to 50% in tax. And depending what state you're in, it can be over 50%. So by moving the money into an IRA and then shifting it over to a Roth, now your son, now your daughter, now your heirs can inherit the Roth IRA. They can still let it grow for the 10 years. And then after the 10 years, they can now withdraw the same $1 million, and they don't have to pay a dime in tax when they go and withdraw the full $1 million. But the only way they can get it over there is by first getting it over into a traditional IRA. So if you're an individual that is planning on retiring over the next couple years and you're looking for strategies on how to get your money from a 401k or a 403b or a TSP or a 457, and you're looking to do a rollover into a traditional IRA, and you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way and you're not making any mistakes in the process, make sure you click on the link below. You'll meet with one of our wealth advisors. They'll walk you through the step-by-step process that you should be following to make sure that you're doing your rollover in the most efficient way. I can't tell you how many people that we meet with that try to do these things, they try to do their rollovers, and they make a lot of mistakes in the process and ends up costing them thousands of dollars in taxes. So make sure you click on the link below. We're here to help. So here are the 3 reasons that you might want to keep your money inside a 401k and not shift it out into an IRA. So the first reason is something called early retirement. See, a lot of people don't know this very unique rule about 401ks. And one of the rules that they have is that if you leave your job after age 55 and you want to withdraw money from your 401k, you don't have to pay the normal 10% penalty, but as long as you left from your job after age 55. So the problem is that, let's just say that you're 56 years old and you now say, I want to retire. And now you move your 401k to an IRA. Well, you see, IRAs have a 10% penalty if you take it out before 59 and a half. So if you're 56 years old and you move your money from a 401k to an IRA and then you pull it out of the IRA, you're going to have to pay an extra 10% penalty. So you might not want to do that. So what you normally will want to do is you'll want to leave some money inside your 401k to make sure that it holds you off from age 55 to 59 and a half. That way you can withdraw money from your 401k and you don't get hit with that 10% penalty. So if you're planning on retiring between 55 and 59 and a half, you might want to leave some money in your 401k to hold you off until 59 and a half. Now, the second reason you might want to leave money inside your 401k is that if you are planning on working into your 70s and maybe even your 80s, you might not want to move your money from a 401k to an IRA. And the reason is because if you have a 401k at your job and you're 73, 74, 75 years old and you're still working for that company, there are no RMDs, meaning there are no required minimum distributions, meaning you are not forced to have to start taking money out of those accounts, but that's only as long as you stayed working at that company after age 73. So if you're planning on working until your late 70s, it might be a good idea for you to leave some money inside your 401k, especially if you don't want to be forced to start taking money out of your 401k. Now, there's a third reason, and this is probably a very technical one that most people don't even know what it is. There's something called an NUA. It stands for Net Unrealized Appreciation. So let's say that right now you work for a company, and the company you work for, they offer you some stock. So maybe you work for Apple or Amazon or Google, and part of your retirement account, they've just been giving you some sort of stock, and that's sitting inside your 401k. Well, what ends up happening is that if you go and move that 401k, you roll it over to an IRA, once you start taking all the money from the IRA, it's going to be taxed at ordinary income. But here's the beautiful thing about something called an NUA. You can now grab the stock where you worked at. Say you worked at Google and you bought the stock for $20 a share. And now Google stock is worth $100 a share. Well, what you're allowed to do is you're allowed to grab all of those shares that you have and you're allowed to push it out of the 401k, move it into a brokerage account, and then you only pay the tax on the amount that you paid for the stock when you originally bought it. So if you paid for the stock, say $20 a share, and it's now worth $100, you can now move the entire money from that stock into a brokerage account, and you only pay the tax on the $20, even though the value of the stock is worth $100 today. Now, keep in mind, once the money goes into the brokerage account, every time you begin to sell any stocks from there, any shares from there, you will have to pay capital gains. But the beautiful thing, Capital gains get taxed at a lower rate than ordinary income. So if you work for a company that offers you 401k and at the same time you have stock inside that 401k, you want to look at what's been the appreciated value of that stock inside that 401k. So if you work for a big company like that, you want to make sure that you are thinking about these things before you roll it out. So if you're watching this video, it probably means that you have a 401k or a 403b or some sort of retirement account through your job. I can't tell you how many people meet with us on a regular basis to tell us, I wish I would have known this information a lot sooner. I'd be able to make better decisions with my money. So make sure you share this with someone that you care about so they can be on a better path to retirement.